Hello everyone, Keeper here, and welcome back to the Kerbal space program. Now today I'm going to try and get into orbit. I tried to do that on the last video, it failed, but that's because I was using a new design. This one I'm going to use a design I've already perfected just to show it off, and then I'll do a little experiment on possible improvements and stuff. So I'm just going to add a command module. Oh, hello cat. Parachute and decoupler, that's standard. Always start with these. And now this particular design can lift quite heavy loads, and I think I'll use the standard, so I can save it, the standard sort of setup I use. There's an RCS fuel tank, an SAS fuel tank, a half tank, and a mini engine. Oops. And then the symmetry up to 4, RCS thrusters here and here. This is the bit that gets into orbit. Just raise it up a bit. And what am I adding? Oh yeah. Then I need a stack decoupler, an advanced SAS module. This will take advantage of the a gimbaling engine I'll add. Otherwise, if you don't really have an engine that can use or anything that can use an advanced SAS, like a gimbaling engine or a winglet or anything, then there's no point in having one. It's just dead weight because of it. The little SAS is like a gyroscope. It actually emits a force of its own, but isn't able to use any of the other features. Whereas an advanced SAS is the opposite. It uses everything else to try and control the craft, but doesn't actually emit a force itself. So if there's nothing like RCS thrusters or winglets or gimbaling engines or anything that can actually take advantage of, there's no point in having one. But anyway, I need 3 engines and large gimbaling engine. And then I need radial decouplers. This is the stage that almost gets us into orbit, because of I don't want to leave any debris floating around in space. So usually I almost get into orbit with this, and then I just finish off with the top stage. It's got plenty of fuel to get into orbit and get into a really high orbit, and then deorbit again with fuel to spare, even with a half tank. So that's okay. 2 radial decouplers on the sides. If you're going to only have 2 boosters, always put them on the sides, on these 2 sides. If you look at the door here, actually, judging by the size of this building and those shelves, are those shelves? I don't know what they are, but these Kerbals must be tiny. Look at this thing. This place is huge. I never really looked at it before. Anyway, but the sides facing these huge doors here, make sure the engine's on there if you're going to orbit across to the equator. Otherwise the ship will keep trying to roll itself over because of the weight imbalance. Whereas if you want to do a polar orbit, put the 2 decouplers along this way. Though annoyingly with the tricouplers, you can't actually configure them, and they're always the wrong way, because there's only 3 tanks. Because there's 3. Wait, because it's a tricoupler. There's the number 3 is horrible unless you want to go, I think, to the left, to the as an equatorial orbit. If you want to go to the left, that's the only time that they're useful. Okay, now I need 3 fuel tanks on here with the large engines. Take my watch off. And now I need strut connectors. Now this configuration on its own, it would fire these two first before this one, and it doesn't actually have enough thrust to lift the craft off the ground. So what you need to do is add fuel ducts. Actually, something I haven't experimented with fuel ducts is I've seen some people literally just do that from the bottom of a stack of fuel tanks to the top of one here. I know you're supposed to connect them from the bottom of a fuel tank to the top of the where you want them to go to, and there's these little arrows here. There you go, that show the direction of the fuel flow. Because what I want to do, but I don't know whether it works with like a stack, or whether you have to connect one fuel line per individual fuel tank like this. Fuel tank. But I might experiment with that later. There we go. Okay, and now what these are going to do, if I move this engine here, you can see if you hover over the part, it lights up the engine. I'm going to move that down to the first stage. So when you fire the engines, all three engines will go. But this one, because it's connected to all of these tanks, and all the fuel from these tanks will be flowing into this one, it will actually draw fuel from these tanks and not use any of its own. So all three engines will be firing, sharing these fuel tanks, and then once those fuel tanks are spent, you can eject them, and this will continue to fire, and then start using up its own fuel, so that you don't waste any fuel that way. Because otherwise you'd end up getting higher with these tanks, but then not actually have enough fuel in this one because it's too heavy, or something like that. It's just easier. It's easier to control without this weight of these two weighing it down a bit. And I think that's about done. Something I like to do on decouplers here is add another 4 struts here. There we go. Just for extra strength, because of stages like this tend to wobble around quite a lot. I think we're just about done. Yes, these two I need to move up to here, which means as soon as these have run out of fuel and I start this stage, these will detach instantly, rather than having to press space twice. Same with this, because I've got to have all the engines firing constantly, as in no delay between. It's best to not actually have a delay between firing engines whilst you're going up. Otherwise, you'll start to lose speed. Okay, and I'll just save that as Ariane 5, based off the Ariane 5 or Ariane. I don't actually know how you pronounce it. That's just how I pronounce it. But it's the rocket that I based this design off. That's also very similar to the Atlas 5, but it's got a K because it's a Kerbal Space Program. There you go, logic. Anyway, let's launch this. Get the SAS on. There we go. Yeah, you'll want these engines pointing that way. Is it loaded? Yeah, it's loaded. Good. Throttle up and go. There we are. Nice slow lift off. This game has a habit of doesn't matter how good your computer is, it will sometimes lag when you're recording with frames. I mean, it'll always lag when you launch the rocket until it's got all the terrain generated and everything, but it does sometimes have a habit of lagging whilst in flight like that. But it usually corrects itself. Because I've got a separate hard drive that I'm recording this onto, it shouldn't really be as much of a problem. Still going up. And what I want to do is, when I get to 12, it's like the standard procedure that's the best to get into orbit with. roughly. When I get up to 12,000 meters, or 12 kilometers, then that's when you're at the thicker atmosphere, and you don't have to keep going up, because you have to go straight up first, because you have to sort of fight the drag from the air. But then you get into the thinner atmosphere in the blue here, I'm nearly right, and then you start tilting around a bit. And then, I've seen things, there we go, last fuel tanks are these side boosters, and I'll start rotating. It's a very, very stable rocket, so this isn't too hard. Now what I normally do is I rotate to about here, and then I just hold it until these tanks run out. Then I start tilting over a bit slower. Keeling over? Sounds like I've got some sort of problem. There we go. That's sort of gradually widening our trajectory just to make it easier and to have more time to get into orbit. Whereas if you have a really, really sharp trajectory, then you have to have a lot of thrust very quickly, or else you'll start falling very quickly. There we go. And eject them because they've run out of fuel, and this engine keeps going. And we're still going up nice and quickly, and I'll start to tilt over further. Whoops, not that fast. But the idea is when you're at 35 kilometers there, meters, sorry, then you should be at about 45 degrees right here, and then you should just keep going up like this until you're at about 90 degrees by the time you're at 70 kilometers or something. It depends on how high in orbit you want to get into, but I usually don't quite do it. I don't pilot it constantly, I just do this. No, perhaps this isn't quite as high as I'd like it to be. I'll just tip up again. That's better, it's going up again. There we go. I've seen some people make ships that are absolutely huge. They've got loads of engines, loads of fuel tanks, and still haven't been able to get into orbit. Seriously, the simplest designs tend to be the best most of the time. You can see where the fuel lines and stuff are detached. But yeah, the simplest designs tend to be the best normally. Like, this is actually a pretty simple rocket, and we're getting into orbit with ease. There's, you know, only 3 engines. Really tiny, tiny second stage. And you could see earlier that it had barely used any of the tanker fuel here, getting off the ground. And then we've got a really easy time of getting into orbit here. You can see our trajectory is really, really widening now. It's quite low at the moment, but that will naturally go up anyway. If you want to expand the trajectory without increasing the highest point, you've actually got to point downwards slightly, about here, because of because the planet is round, you're still slightly going up. So the pointing downwards, it seems a bit odd to do this. I'll just tilt over more. It seems counterintuitive, but it does actually work better, because then you're actually going towards the tangent rather than away from it. There we go. You can see how the trajectory is really widening now, and so is our perhaps is going up a bit more. I don't want it to do that. What fuel we got? That's perfect. There we go. And you can see if I tilt down to about here, the apparatus slows down, but that's probably because we're not very close to it. I'll just wait. Throttle down, throttle down, throttle down. There we go. 150 meters allows me to warp 50 times rather than just 10. It's just from a practical point of view based on the time warping. You can go higher. How much fuel do I have left? That's fine, because I won't actually be using all of this fuel. This is the extra fuel is just as a just-in-case sort of measure. Here we go, up to the apoapsis, climb warp down, tilt round, throttle up. This also helps with tilting because it's a thrust vectoring engine. You can move its thrust around. There we go. Widen up the orbit, and as soon as we generate a periapsis, there we go, it's there. Keep that below 20 kilometers. Always keep it below. I'm going to detach and throttle up. with this little mini stage at the top. That means that the second stage here, you can see its trajectory is still in the atmosphere. That will end up landing in the atmosphere and burning up. So there's no debris left in space. Cut the engines. That is a pretty good orbit. That will naturally just descend, burn up in the atmosphere. There it is. And this, you see, we got into orbit, barely any fuel used. It is only a half tank, but you don't really need much more than that. This is a good orbit tutorial, isn't it? Now, the periapsis is a bit lower than I want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to time warp. There you go, you see, you can't time warp unless you're that high. So I'm just going to keep time warping until I get to the apoapsis, when I can just slightly increase the periapsis. I could use the RCS thrusters for this, the little tiny thrusters on the side, because you don't need much thrust. This might take a while. So actually, when I get to the periapsis, when I get to the periapsis, I'll just talk about the RCS thrusters a bit and moving around in space with them, because I know I used them in the last episode, but that was a bit fleeting. I just want to give you like a proper overview of them and some more features of maneuvering around in space, because we will do an orbital rendezvous thing later on. Okay, with the periapsis, we should start going up now. There we go. Now at the moment we're tilted upwards. This will happen normally because you're spinning round the planet basically, but this view is relative to the planet. So if you're pointing in that direction, then by the time you get round to here, that's not going to have changed. You're still going to be pointing in that direction, but for someone looking at the ground, it would look like if you're pointing downwards, and over here you'd be pointing upwards. A little complicated. It's a bit complicated to explain, but it's pretty easy to understand. There's the target for next time. Well, not next time. A later time. So I want to kind of build up to that with lots of other things. But anyway, if I turn the SAS off and the RCS on, there we go. You can see them firing around. Now at the moment I'm using the WS, A and D keys, which are the standard keys you'd normally use. You can see the SAS using its internal force. This makes it wobble around. If I was using an advanced SAS with this, it would be using the RCS thrusters because if they're switched on. You should be able to see this little engine gimbal as well. Oops, RCS is on. There you go. You can just about see it moving. Though I'm also using the little gyroscopes inside the ship to move it around, because there are two different methods of moving a ship around. You can either turn off the SS and use its internal gyroscopes, which is pretty good. It's fine if it's a small ship, but for a larger ship, you'll want something a bit more than that. And this is where the RCS thrusters come in, because they will actually emit quite a large force. You can see them firing around. They will in the Kerbal space program, they will automatically fire depending on whether you want to roll or whatever, and where they're placed. If they're above the centre of mass, say, and you want to turn that way, these will fire that way, those will fire that way, etc. You'll see. It's pretty easy to see. And of course, because in space there's nothing to stop you, we're just going to keep turning until the stability system's turned on. Or you could try and stabilise yourself just with the RCS thrusters. If you press caps lock, so it's really fine movements, you can just about see them fine. The longer you hold them on for, the longer the harder the more force they'll emit. But it allows you to do really fine adjustments. There we go, just about stopped with no SAS. Another way of doing it is just to turn yourself around. But of course that'll make the Kerbal sick. There goes Bill and Bob, really terrified. And Jeb having a great time, as normal. Actually, why are they still terrified? Oh, it's the sun, isn't it? They're vampires. But anyway, now for the RCS thrusters, there's also other keys you can use. There's not only the WASD keys to roll the ship, but there's also the I, J, K, L, H and N keys, which are for translation. So this depends on where how you're orientated. But if I just twizzle around with the Q and E keys to get to wrong button, I'll use fine movement for this. Okay, I'm holding there, and I'll twizzle around there. Nope, not quite. There. Okay. Now say we're pointing down to the ground here. The I will make you go up, oops, like that, and K to go down. Though you can map these, of course. You can map these. Normally it's K to go up and I to go down, which is a bit weird. But and then there's L and J, which is just side-to-side movements when you're rendezvousing. Though the odd thing is it will actually fire. Holding L, it says you're going right. Say you're pointing towards it. You'll think that it means to go right, but it doesn't. It actually just means that you're firing in that direction. So it actually helps if you've got your view pointed this way to understand which way you're pointing. And then H is to go forwards, N to go backwards, like that. Now, if you'll have seen, when I fired the thrusters, I'm actually gradually rolling round this way. And that's actually because of, oops, I've got the SS on now. And that's actually because of weight distribution. If you have the RCS thrusters off balance, then when you use them, the ship will keep trying to roll itself, which can be quite irritating, like when you're trying to land on the moon or trying to do some sort of, trying to catch a ship in mid-orbit that's stranded or something. That can be pretty annoying. So good design is always important. So these, I think I've placed them too far this way. They need to be along this grey bar here, grey line. But anyway, I'll just accelerate time again. I'll use the winglets next time as well to show you what they do and not do. There's some that are used by the advanced SAS to keep the ship stable in an atmosphere if it's especially heavy. And then there's some others that don't actually do anything. They don't move. And I haven't really found a use for them other than just for aesthetics, just to make the ship look good. Oh, I'm higher than 50. There we go. Yeah, I haven't really found a use for those apart from making the ship look good. And I have no complaints about that. But they can help increase the drag when you're landing. Oops, no, that's the wrong way. I'm going to face towards the orbit. And then I can just use H. Is it H? Yeah. Just for very fine movements. There we go. That's above 100. There we go. Whoa. That's very, very good. That's almost perfectly circular. Yeah, if you use the yeah, these will start to spaz out as they become closer to each other's values. If you've got an absolutely perfect orbit, these will just keep spinning around and going all over the place. So the more they spaz, the better, the more elliptical your orbit is, basically. And that is a very round orbit. I'm quite pleased that it was almost perfectly elliptical when I just took off. That was. I've never done that before. I'm getting better at this. But yeah, you can use the RCS thrusters if you just have to very, very finely tune the orbit. If I'd used the gimbaling engine, I would have overshot quite a lot. And then you can just press caps lock to get these blue, which can give you even finer adjustments. Because I want to do a geostationary orbit at some point as well. Launch a fake satellite or something. Actually, if I install an Overpunch's parts pack, I'll have a satellite that I can launch into orbit. I'll do that later, but I'm not quite finished with the stock parts yet. So let's do an orbit and then see if we can land here. Up to 50 times. Yeah, I don't want to land night time again. I want to land in the daytime. Oh, actually, we could see a sunrise. We're whizzing around really, really fast. There we go. Da, da, lens flare. There's a really nice cinematic effect there. Screenshot. Why is Bob still terrified? I mean, Bill's a little bit more indifferent now, but Bob's still absolutely fearing for his life. Oh, I'll start boosting now. I should have started boosting a while ago, actually. Doesn't matter. Okay, so I'll point the opposite direction of the orbit and I'll start the engine. And this will gradually decrease the periapsis. I'll just accelerate to full. This is actually quite a weak engine. And I'll get that periapsis down just so it's intersecting with the ground. Because I want a nice shallow descent. There we go. That's perfect. I want a relatively shallow descent because in real life you'd want a fairly shallow descent so you didn't burn up. And this would be good practice for when we they add heat into this. So the trajectory when you land is actually really important, or will be very important. And look at how much fuel we've used. This is a half tank, and we've got completely into orbit and deorbited with barely any fuel. You know, we could get into a much higher orbit with this, and I'll do a I'll do a geostationary orbit next time. I've never actually done one of them before. So I'll use the same rocket just to prove it. Although I might have to use with the second stage, I don't want to leave it in space, just spinning around forever. Now what I might do is I might use the second stage to get into... Oh, it doesn't have enough fuel. Okay, forget that. I'll just use this ship there, because it should have enough fuel. And if it doesn't, that'll be a fail, and I'll have to use add a full tank onto it rather than just having a half tank. Okay, let's just warp. Oh, I'm below 150 kilometers now. Now, when we start getting into the atmosphere, that's when I'll detach the command pod from the rest of the ship. Because otherwise you're in danger of this not actually moving away very fast, and then you might bump into it or something. Whereas if you're in the atmosphere, this will get caught by drag quicker than this, and this will shoot off and burn pretty quickly. Okay, we're approaching now. Here's the land that we're going to be landing on. There's the moon. If we were going to the moon, this is when we'd boost for it. Ah, there we go. Okay, we've hit the atmosphere. Point away, so the heat shield's facing. SS on, detach. There we go. Now you'll see that the trajectory is slowly coming in and the apoapsis is slowly coming down as we're getting caught by the atmosphere. What is that? Like black smudges. Ooh, is that going to be a future volcano, or is that just a glitch? Huh, no idea. Increase time a bit. Ooh. Put caps lock on and slightly rotate the ship round. Yeah, with the turn RCS off because I haven't actually got any. When you're just the command module flying down, and when heat's added, this will be very important. The atmosphere, when you're in the thicker atmosphere, it will guide you down. But when you're not in the thicker atmosphere, and this would be the point where you sort of, you know, you got the flame and everything, you'll have to do this manually. But you've got to keep caps lock on, so these are blue, and SAS on, because otherwise, if you have one of them off, you'll just fly around all over the place and have no control. Which is a bit odd because it's so light. If I turn SAS off, you know, I have no control over it at all. Yeah. So I just there we go. I've no idea why this is so aerodynamic, because it actually dishes in there. This is the normal design that they use. It's a really weird design. I wouldn't expect it to be so aerodynamic, but when you get caught by the wind, here we go, in the thicker atmosphere, I turn SAS off, we'll wobble around a little bit, but we'll get caught by the wind and it will guide us in. There we are, you can see it tilting a bit there. You'll probably be able to hear the wind rushing soon. Oops. Then time warp on, or else this is going to take ages. There's the other bit. You can actually still see it. Okay, we're coming in. Nice and slow, or fast. Fast. There we are, really slowing down now. There we go. Being pulled in. Yep. And parachute. Slow us down even more. When we're vertical and dropping down, I'll turn the SAS on. Just to stop it rolling around wildly if it's on a hill or something. It just helps to stop it do that. Ah, here we go, here's the ground. The whining sound of the wind. The parachute, which will open soon. Still got an apoapsis. And there it is. Open. SAS on. Oh, we're on a flat plane, so that's okay. Actually, I've never landed here before. Nice and flat. Bill's still looking a bit unsure, but at least Bob's happy now. Jeb's always happy. Yeah. Oh, time warp 1. I accidentally pressed the map key then. We've landed. So I forgot that if you're time warping whilst landing like that, it'll think you're going twice as fast as you actually are and you'll crash. That was a close call. There's the moon. No foliage around. There's normally foliage. Anyway, that was a nice, successful, perfectly elliptical orbit with my usual orbiter. And let's end the flight. They are 3.2 Gs, most Gs. That's good. Liquid fuel engine crashed into. Yeah, that's good. Anyway, subscribe for more Kerbal Space Program. That was a really nice, successful flight as opposed to last episode. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.